Alright, so today I'm gonna like pretty much just give you a whole walkthrough on trash. So these are the materials for this week. I included this trash cookbook. So there's a bunch of different like quick effects and just kind of like formulas for those. Just in trash specifically, this was put out by Isotope by them, so it's pretty good. Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, Proteals, we haven't really talked that much, but we just kind of like silently follow each other and like each other's shit. His new stuff is always super crazy. This is the Cult of Sound Design. Welcome, initiate. Here, all of sign God's synths are equal. Alright, so definitely cop this. I think it's like somewhere on the internet for free as well. So also add some more links to Isotope approved videos. So it's a pretty cool one. Also, Knower the Boy has a bunch of stuff on Trash 2 as well. Highly recommend you check out his stuff if you're not already subscribed to his Patreon. As well as Noisha. So they also have a Patreon as well. And I think multiple tiers, you can subscribe. Me helping out Noisha right now. You can definitely get like a personal lesson from Ties himself. Pretty sure he still has that out. Yeah, so it's like a mixture of, you know, him helping people out and then also, you know, being paid for his time and stuff. But if you do subscribe to that, I believe they also give you a like free guest list to one of their next shows or something. So it's pretty good. Okay. So I have pretty much this whole outline set up for trash today. So yeah, I won't be going that deep into a lot of this other shit that I shared, which is wave folding and the theory and stuff, because you know it's a lot to digest. So we'll do it in kind of like sequences. So we will kind of like talk about it, but we won't go like as deep as we will next week, because that's going to be just all about how to wave fold and how to wave shape like intentionally. Because once you know how to do that, you can really be intentional with like sinoid fold or sign compression. Like sign compression is a really good way to get a quick like, you know, handle on narrow sound design and stuff. So this is a really good tool for that. So there's a bunch of different articles that I shared in here that are kind of like geared towards the DSP of wave shaping, which is pretty deep. So this article here, this didn't need to, but it's still good. I like the initial description. Thank you for the emote share. I haven't changed that that sound bite. It's not like a regular twitcher. I'm twitchy, but not that twitchy. Alright, so wave shaping is a popular synthesis and transformation technique. So, you know, we talked about in the, you know, drum design intro, you know, about how 909 circuits are made. And so 909 circuits were really, you know, geared towards, you know, a cost-effective way of making a drum synthesized. So back then, it was cheaper to use sawtooth waves or get sawtooth oscillators than it was for sine wave oscillators, if not impossible at that time. So what they did was pretty much create a foldback distortion that creates a copy of itself and then phases out certain harmonics. And that's called wave folding. So wave folding. Hey, how's it going? Thank you for the follow. Yeah, so wavefolding is really, really interesting because you can actually like, again, transform the waveform and then take it a little further. So I think it's really, really worthwhile to kind of sit down and start to think about how, wavefolders work. So I was saying it's reducing the amount of harmonics in a waveform. So from this to this by phasing out this harmonic inside of this. So it's kind of like this, but backwards. So what it's doing is it's creating a foldback of a sawtooth because foldback distortion creates an active copy. So the wave folding can be used in different ways as well. It's not just like that. There's a really good Bastel's timber. That one's a super good wave folder, and that's in Eurorack. I was about to say it's also in VCV, but it's not. They have a couple things like that, but it's not. U-Fold, they kind of have something like this, but timber is recommended by like pretty much all the top Eurorack people, including Zach Countryman. Yeah, so he has one, and that one's super good. So yeah, wave folding is similar to wave shaping, but it's kind of blending two different worlds. So wave folding is a very distinct type of wave shaping. It is achieved by using a comparator in a circuit which constantly checks whether the incoming signal goes over the preset threshold level. So the comparator, which is comparing what incoming signal to the threshold that you set it at, that is the point when it will start wavefolding. So if you push it beyond that point, then you will start to distort a signal. So more gain into its input, more distortion. So I give the example of it fitting a a circle shape through a square hole. So you're gonna pretty much reshape it, hard cut the corners. So it's pretty interesting. But yeah, there's ways to affect both forms of harmonics as well with wavefolding. Because of this comparator effect, it allows pretty much the circuit to start mirroring, which is folding itself back, why it's called like a fold back distortion as well. So mirroring its own image to create a series of folds which contribute to an increasingly brighter sounds. So the more you fold it back in different phase relationships as well. So you can just offset the phase, which it talks about over here, also called symmetry, which symmetry is talking about the symmetry of the waveform itself. So above, zero phase, what does the waveform look like? Is it symmetrical or asymmetrical, meaning different on both sides? So it's a interesting effect. This thing is a lot deeper than you might think, hence why they have this whole comparison, which is wave shaping versus distortion. This is from Perfect Circuit, pretty big Eurorack source. You can order shit online from them, and they have a bunch of different shops. Really cool one in LA. Up here in SF, we have another shop called Robot Speak. Robot Speak is super cool. Steve is the man. He just sits around and records himself making weird sounds all day with a bunch of Eurorack shit. But yeah, okay, so we're gonna go a lot deeper into this section here after we kind of like jump into trash, because I don't want to go too deep into this and just like bog you down on a Saturday. But also, this is a really complex thing, so that's why I compare it to like FM synthesis, because it is commonly used, but people really don't understand what they're doing with it. It just has very specific effects. Say even with like sinoid folds, kind of a different balance between knowing how and where to fold back and what type of sound you can get from it also how to control that frequency that you're folding back with, and how to, almost like inject stuff into its amplitude curve. So we kind of talked about dynamics and stuff a bit before this whole, section here, about how bit depth affects dynamics. So when you're thinking about wave shaping, it's kind of the same thing. So you have, a linear curve, which is a straight line. We load up the basic saturator. A linear curve should kind of look like that. Really, it should look like a line from 1 to 1 here. So analog clip is kind of like a soft wave shape. So it is wave shaping because it's offsetting this linear curve. So if the line is 0 to 100 right here in a straight format, if we load up trash now, you can kind of see that. All right, so a straight line like this. So this is not a straight line. So when I go in offset like this, now I'm offsetting the dynamic range of the incoming signal. So if this is the natural bit depth range of 24-bit to 32-bit, then it's fully dynamic. It can go all the way down to 0 without getting normalized. So normalization happens similar to this. So once you offset that linear curve and say at pretty much medium volumes, which with dB, SPL, and dBu, it's really exponential. So that means that 10 dB is going to sound drastically louder than 20 dB and below. So if you start going to that point, say if this is 10 dB right here, then we start offsetting the amplitude curve and say now 10 dB is going to pretty much be stretched out for its sustain. So now all the low level information is being pushed up to loud until it's clipped off and it's all the way at 0. So clippers pretty much do that, and that's the whole point of having clip distortion, is you can hard clip it and pretty much turn it into a square wave. All right, so wave shaping is pretty dope, just for that. So we're going to talk more about, some of the balancing with these circuits and stuff, but just for the moment, understand wave shaping like that, where it's a straight line. The minute you go and boost this curve, you start diminishing the noise floor, meaning that it's going to be normalized up to 0. You're going to push the noise floor up, compress the signal. So this is another form of compression as well. So when you run things through tubes and other, analog circuits with, physical mediums that you're going through, this is happening naturally. The wave shape from the physical medium itself. So it's kind of like the wave shaper is the tube itself, which amplifies the signal. So tube distortion will naturally compress and create new harmonics, or second order harmonics. Things that are generated after going into the saturator or shaper. So there's really, really good, just basic kind of like fold back preset distortions, kind of like Saturn and Sound Toys, pretty much. But not the same thing as trash, because trash gives you not only one curve but 2 stages for a wideband as well as a multi-band version of that. So technically you could have 8 saturators running at once because you have 2 stages. So you can run this in stages, run it through a filter it out if it's getting too harsh, you know, but pretty much you have a ton of control of this. So yeah, it's pretty fun to kind of just mess around with it. But yeah, I really love taking resamples and blasting them through trash. It really depends on the source material. Sometimes, like, if I'm trying to make a bass, I'll go for some bass samples. Alright, so that's pretty good right here. Alright, so why am I doing it like this? Because when I go and choose something that can be like a sample that I'm going to go and transform or whatever, if I go and repitch this, it's going to degrade the audio. It's also a really quiet resample. So the minute I start to transpose this down octaves, it's going to degrade it. So once I go and start to run it through saturation, I can kind of shave off all those artifacts and create new harmonics around them. Pretty much resampling it through saturation and creating better harmonics around pretty much little, you know, artifacted high, you know, frequencies. That's really what you want to go and like smooth out with saturation and stuff like that. You can also use saturation to like brighten up vocals, you know, create effects as well. Beefy. Now without trash, just a basic wave shape I made there. Alright, most of that amplitude though is coming from the fact that I pushed through this curve right here. So the farther away from, I guess, 100%, the more dynamic it's going to sound. I'm going to start to push it up to 100, then it will clip off and sound less dynamic. Okay, so that's your basic tutorial on wave shaping for the day. Now let's kind of like jump into this entire instrument here, or plugin. Alright, so Trash is a production suite. So all production suites are going to pretty much have, you know, multiple pages that allow you to pretty much patch into. One of my favorite production suites right now is the Multipass, because it's all of kilohertz shit in one multi-band scenario. So technically you can kind of do similar things with the Multipass, but you are limited to the things that it's not fine-tuned and specialized for, which is this. So I recommend both Trash, Saturn, Multipass, all types of other things to like create crazy distortions. The thing above in Trash too, it's a normal spectrum. Yes, it is a normal spectrum. So that is something that exists in both the Trash section and dynamics. So you'll have this kind of envelope view, multi-band view, and then some type of sidechain detection filter. And then the other ones that don't, anything that's kind of labeled like this will have pretty much just a spectrum. Alright, so obviously you kind of know how to load it up, but when it loads up, you see your presets. So all your presets will be in here. You can go and make new presets whenever you're working on stuff. I really don't make too many presets for Trash because it's usually just for each sound. But if I'm going for like a quick sound, I might use some of this stuff. I like some of the, you know, subtle effects like add muscle, add sugar, baby fat. It's weird names. But they add convolution and saturation pretty quickly, so I like those ones. But yeah, kind of like check around, see which ones are good. I don't really recommend against using presets and plugins, because with plugins, specifically effect plugins, you can have a bunch of different combinations of things that you didn't think of before, especially if you're just getting started. So, you know, this stuff is pretty confusing, so definitely a good place to start. So if you want to add a preset, hit add, and then you can delete, update. So if you change something, update the preset and it will save over. You can compare to your last preset and then make new folders. Having the new folder function right here is super nice. Alright, so normally you don't want to go and touch any of this. You can undock your preset manager and throw it outside of trash. Dock it, goes back into here. But yeah, changing the folder would be if you had a separate bank of saturation presets that you wanted to go to. I don't know. If you're an engineer on the fly doing stuff for people live, I can see that being very beneficial. Appreciate the sub gifts. Good peeps. All right, so that's the preset manager here, really easy. Then on the right side, we have input level, output level, and our limiter. So we can lock these left and right channels as well. So we are stereo linked. Double click on them, we'll jump them back to the original. If something clips, you can click the counter and it will reset it back to infinity. Then you can bypass and then dry wet for parallel processing right here. The limiter is probably the most basic one. The limiter actually doesn't have any functions inside of trash on its outside. It's actually inside of here in the options to use the functions for the limiter. So I believe that would be on the module section. I/O is separate from that. But the limiter behavior default is on 0 latency. You want that on. But you can change it to a clipper or a loud limiter as well. But it's default to quiet. Yo, what's up, Galva? All right, so that's pretty much where that will live for the limiter. So let's open up the options menu again, kind of just check out what's going on here. So if you're running into problems with, you know, processing for your RAM or whatever, it's just, you know, too many plugins, doing a lot of, you know, animation stuff, you can turn all that stuff off here. You can also limit the frame rates. Thank you for the follow. So frame rate limiting is pretty cool because say if you're doing really, really high resolution stuff and you need to see a high resolution version of a spectrum, you can turn up the limiter to 60. Most computers will put out 60 at the bottom. That's pretty much their bottom rung. You're really just limited by your monitor. So getting a monitor that is geared for 60 specifically is good. You want to have your refresh rate line up with the frames that you're going for. Because if your refresh rate doesn't line up, then your monitor will try to skip frames in order to lock back in there. And then you can change the opacity of trash right here and change the brightness. Dark trash. I don't usually turn these off because I like the blinking. Allows me to know it is blinking. Keeps me in check. All right. Then there's a history graph in here, so you can make a bunch of changes and go back in time and go forward in time. Huge undo list. And then you can make sets of histories. Yeah, I feel you, Galva. You know, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here doing this. It's for my health too. But yeah, so back into the options menu. So I usually don't have updates on. I don't really like checking for updates on any of my plugins just because they might mess up the compatibility. They might, yeah. If I need the update, I'll do the update for my DAW specifically. If it functions already, I'll just keep it off. But yeah, so that's pretty much everything you need to worry about here. You can view your buffer size, and it just captures your buffer. So whatever your buffer is set to 512. So 512 will just be constantly captured. If something's fucking up with it, which, could definitely happen if you have a bad clock, you can see it in that buffer right there where it's not catching. Sometimes the buffer will get stuck, and then it will clip your output and then not undo the clip, which means it will just read out as a full clipped fucking meter. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that happen. It can happen in any of your plugins. It could also happen per track. So if you overclip it plus 12 or something happens when you're saturating or compressing, and an error happens with the buffer, it will just hold it in a clip, and then you'll have to restart. So here you can go and see what's going on here, and then resync, have everything freeze, unfreeze the delay compensation. So this is really for like high level stuff if you're working with like non-delay compensated DAWs, which everything is now. It shouldn't be a problem now. But yeah, so that's just kind of how all that works. All right, so spectrum, this is going to change up your spectrum. So if you have something running through trash, you can see it kind of like in your spectrum analyzer here. So you can change how the spectrum responds. So enable mini spectrum, which allows you to see it from a small view. I personally like the fill on just because it kind of fills in the back of that a little bit more. You can kind of see just how much weight is in those harmonics. I like that about ProQ as well. And then spectrum type, you can change what type of spectrum you have. And this also exists in Insight as well. So when we talk about metering and stuff in audio engineering, that'll be part of that. So what this does is it turns the spectrum into what it actually is, which is a partial bank. It's a filter bank that's resonated by incoming signal. So if we change this into anything that's not linear, it will look like this. Why would we want that? I don't know. No, there are specific reasons. It's really just so you can see like large bands kind of just grouped together and just see their amplitudes, and then see like a general RMS of where they're at. It's so, you have a spectrum version of RMS as opposed to all peak, which is peak holding and stuff like that, where you can show the peak hold. So that'll allow you to see the spectrum over time, kind of like a regular spectrum. So there's a bunch of little functions to this thing, but that's just really, isotope, trying to flex as hard as possible. So window size is pretty much going to tell your engine, how quickly to take samples of this incoming signal. So at lower window sizes, you're going to have a really, really quick spectrum, but less resolution. So at higher window sizes, it'll be a little bit slower, but you'll get a little bit more view on what's happening. So if you want to be able to see that at a higher resolution, you got to go limit your frames to 60 and hope for the best. All right, so it's jumping around right now just because I'm running a ton of shit. But, you know, this is kind of cool if you're going to have the peak hold on, because then you can see all these different harmonics in here. But yeah, that's how that works. Again, this stuff kind of works the same in all of the isotope plugins. I usually just keep it around 2048. It's default to 4096. Overlap is going to be an amount of overlap between the incoming signal. So if you have 0 overlap, then it's always going to be exactly what is happening right now. So there's going to be no kind of like, let's let this down here. Yeah, there's going to be no blending between it. By default, it's going to be 50. 50 is fine. You know, you don't really need to go mess with that too much more. But you can change your peak hold time right here. This is something I will go and change. If I'm really trying to see the spectrum of something, you can change it to infinite, which will just hold it and then add to it. And then your window is going to change your entire scale for your measuring system. So Han is the default, and that's kind of like what we're used to looking at. But these are all different like people that pretty much develop these different measuring scales. Really what they do is they focus in on different frequency ranges. So I like Blackman because it focuses in on the mid-range. That's probably my favorite one to switch into if I switch it at all. And then average time, again, is going to be for the peak hold and the overlap. So when's it happening? What are you looking at? So that should all be in real time. All right, then your I/O here. Don't really need to mess with this too much. If you want to see different peak outputs here, you can change it to RMS or peak. So this is the new standard, is having RMS and peak. So the peak is going to be the grayed out version behind the brighter version. Brighter version is going to be RMS signal. And then your peak indicator is going to be the little line that is held at the top. So you can set it to infinite, and that will hold the peak and then allow you to see the exact value. It's like, oh, it's coming in at -5, it's coming out at -6. All right, and then over here we have integration time. This is pretty much a different measuring system for time. All right, so 300 VU voltage unit is pretty much the standard. So don't need to mess with that, but you can change your peak output time by doing this. So again, with RMS specifically. So VU meters kind of read average inputs, but kind of averages in between both of these. So 300 is the default. If I need to be quicker, we'll mess with it. All right, so this stuff you can mess with, you know, if you really want to go and see exactly what's going on here. But yeah, besides that, only thing I go and mess with is right here on the in output gain. If I go and bypass it, then I can push the gain. So this is cool because you can like kind of like gain match and compare things between what you did before and what you did after. Because again, like when you're really, you know, an engineer, you understand that things shouldn't just be louder, they should sound better. So when you go and compare it to the original, you want to make it just as loud as the thing you just processed up to that loudness. This is exactly how you're supposed to compare your masters to your mixes. So like if I get a mix that's a little bit different and I run it through settings that I had on my master, I'll go and compare the original and be like, well, I got to go now and sit down and kind of tweak some stuff just so I can make sure everything responds correctly, because masters should be very, very balanced with their processing chains. If you have to do anything to it, you know, the minute a rev comes in, you have to go and sit down and like tweak a bunch of stuff. But yeah, so we talked about this a little bit with the limiter, which is the modules. So this is telling all your modules how to handle some of the behind the scenes stuff. So with the filters, you can alt solo filter queue. So what is this? This means when I'm in my filter, I can hold down alt or option and fine tune and listen to a frequency. This is a listen. All right, so I can go and say, hey, don't be so sharp, bro. I can open that up. That's one of those hidden ones. Definitely very, very useful. That exists in Ozone as well. Yeah, very similar to ProQ. Yeah, but Ozone has been doing this since Ozone 1. That was a minute ago. I was back in high school when I first started using Ozone. Because my band teacher got it for the band rig. And I was like, oh shit, that's mastering. I can just run stuff through presets and it's done. I don't have to mix at all. That's how it works. Boy, was I wrong. All right, so convolution in here. Oh, to be clear, this stuff will have pretty much, you know, their functions will be part of the module itself. So when you want to add another band, you'll be able to add a band from the trash module. If you want to be linear phase, you can turn on linear phase right here. Oversample algorithms. This will add more latency to trash though, so you got to be aware of that. Not that much. We're still on 0 latency with our limiter, but now there is latency. So 32 samples. And this is pretty much telling your dynamic metering how to redraw the reduction curve and the threshold meter, what's it going to tell you. Histogram really doesn't help you that much, although it is cool to kind of like see a different version of that. So histogram. So what I like is that you can see the waveform. But really what I want to see is like a hard meter for my compression, but this is really cool just for trash because sometimes I can do some weird effects with this. So histogram again will look like this. So I don't know if anybody knew that existed in Trash 2, but you have a pretty interesting way to go and compress a signal. So now instead of seeing a meter, because since I'm just so used to using a real compressor, like I kind of know how to do what I want, but if you're a little bit more visual at some things, this can actually help you get your head wrapped around compression as well. So what is the histogram telling you? It's telling you frequency to amplitude. So at what amplitude are the frequencies kind of like summing and becoming super loud? All right, so again, that was in modules, threshold meter, histogram. So gain reduction will look like this. So I like having this meter here. That's a personal preference. So really cool though. definitely something that's overlooked. And again, you can add more bands right here as well. Okay, so we'll talk about each of these modules now. So last page in here is the convolver. This is telling your convolution how long the max sample can be. 44.1, which is normal, kind of like a short impulse, or 288,000. So that's samples. How many samples in pretty much time can we actually can't see samples here, but we can see samples in the sampler. Here I'm like trying to do shit you can do in Pro Tools. Let's convert this. All right, so sample end right here, set that to 280,000 around there. That's about 7 seconds. Around there, 6-7 seconds. You know, 5, 6. Right in between 5 and 6 seconds. So 5 and 6 seconds is the length of convolution impulse response you can import into Trash. Because this is not limited to the bank of sounds they give you. They have a big load button right here, and then you can add it to your library. So that's cool. But again, inside the module for convolution, this is where you will have your setting for max sampler length. So there's a little sampler integrated into Trash. That is how the convolution works. All right, so that's going to be it for the options portion. So if you're confused on any of those, definitely inside the manual that I outlined and stuff. So pretty simple. Okay, so now in the filters, we have 2 filters. This is actually a good opportunity to talk about the graph as well here. So if you want to go and reorder your filtering EQ before compressor, EQ before after saturation, which is filter before saturator, before and after, however you want to do it, hit the graph button on the bottom right, and it will allow you to reorder your filters. So you can put a filter at the end of your chain as well, after your delay. You can even put your spectrum analyzer at different points in your graph as well. So that's just click and drag and drop. So another cool thing is you can drop your filters on top of each other and do parallel filtering. So you can use 2 filters. So you can put both filter 1 and filter 2 on your input, or at any point in your chain. You can even stack them separately. It's weird. And then if you change any of these into multi-band mode, then you will see that pop up in your graph as a multi-band. So that's reordering the filters. You can put them anywhere in your chain and then stack them parallel. So this is signal flow. Everything's in series or parallel, depending on how I route it. So all the multibands will be in parallel. So parallel additive summing splits one incoming signal into 3 bands for now, unless I split it into 4, which is a right-click insert band, and then you can see 4 bands pop up. So that's cool. Can't do that in Saturn, unfortunately. But Saturn has a lot of other really, really good shit. like the granular smudging and shit like that. That one's super cool. All right, so in the filter section here, just to talk about, how to go and reorder stuff, how to pre and post filter, and everything before we get into using the modules. So how to set up the signal flow, how to set up the options. Now we're starting the filters. All right, so we have all these different bands here. We can change the type of band by either right-clicking on the band itself. So we have all these different voicings of filters. So clean is going to be normal. Res is going to be a hyper resonated filter. So it's going to be kind of like the retro, which is like the Moog self-resonating, but more hypes, so sharper. Doesn't have limiting, I would say. And we have some hard definitions in the manual as well. Similar to the way autofilter works. So autofilter has the different modes with self-resonating filters, but then also they have or do not have limiting built into the circuit. And they say that in the bottom left corner with all the descriptions on the autofilter. Yeah, right. So you can switch any of these bands into anything pretty much. So you can make this just straight up into a bandpass filter. You can add more filters together. So if you wanted 2 bandpass filters, you'd have to add them together to over resonate one in order to get it to kind of work together. It's going to be harder to make this happen though, because now I'm making like a weird notch filter, because these are running in series. So one is going to be first in the chain. That's why it's a good place to start. So if it wasn't running in series, then this output would show 2 bandpasses crossing each other, kind of like the way it works in Volcano. Personally, I like to use Volcano a little bit more than I'd like to use this filter here. All right, so there's a ton of different like weird bands to mess with. All right, so I'm going to open up my filter list now, so I can just look at them individually. Make this a low pass. All right, so that was the plus button right here. Doesn't add more filters. It gives you a list of all of your filters. So this is called the node. So you can move around your nodes like this, type in values over here, move around values over here as well. Change your node type or your state variable filter type. Again, these are different types of self-resonating filters again. These have saturation circuits at the resonance points now. So screaming will have a really, really harsh one. All good. It's a Saturday. I don't expect anybody to actually show up. But yeah. So these are going to be more for synthesizers specifically. So warm LP is going to be more directly like the Moog. And then straight LP. I use that straight LP. Hold up. I use that straight LP. Sharp, got drum. Drum's super good for like kicks and stuff. You can use envelope followers and stuff. So I don't like valve filters. It's just in general. It's not really my thing. This one's kind of cool though, because you have a bunch of different bands to kind of mess with. So I like this stuff on drones and stuff like that, because I can go and wash it out pretty easily. All right, so you have 2 different voicings of that. So it goes I, A, E, O, U. Sounds like a bunch of monks. A bunch of monks. Just going to use the stock Ableton verb for now. EOS is just chomping through my processing. All right, so that's kind of how the filter works just for each of the types. So again, you can turn them on here, change the types, and they're going to be in series. So one has to be your kind of, you know, wide band effects. You can high pass, pretty much use it like an EQ8 or EQ6, I guess, because there's only 6 bands. If you want to use these as just regular filters, go into peak mode, and then you can add or subtract. And then should be able to fine tune with holding down Command. Option snaps it back to its default, and including its default Q curve. Shift will lock it in place so you cannot go left or right. Shift Command will do fine-tune versions of that. If you hold Shift on moving your resonance, it will also lock it in place. You can also use your scroll wheel to modulate that. So that's your quick way into resonance, is just highlight over the band and scroll. I usually just add Shift as a modifier so I don't go and move anything else while touching this. You can also hold down Command and do a finer version of that as well. All right, so peak version is going to be your EQ regular mode. So pretty much all the regular ones will have, you know, just clean peak filters. So you can try to use them as self-resonant. They will not be as resonant as some of the other ones, but you can combine in a parallel filtering situation a bandpass that's over-resonated in order to get some of those weird peak effects for like drums and stuff. So then you use one as a regular EQ, one as a bandpass, because it's only allowing one thing to pass through the filter going into whatever settings that you have. Spectrum over here. Delay at the end. Okay, so now there's a built-in modulator, which is actually really cool. So you have a built-in LFO type. So this gives you a destination curve. So how fast it's going to modulate up to this point. And now it has a new Q shape too. So 2 different Q shapes, 2 different band shapes for this modulator. And a set of modulator here too. So each band gets its own modulator. Alright, so that's kind of cool, going into a bunch of like distortion, convolution, delay shit. But yeah, so what I'm doing right now is I'm like modulating this band from a low point, again with its own Q shape, to a high point very quickly. I can just open this low pass all the way up as well, so we can just hear this one band modulating. Alright, so that's the allophone here. Before I just keep messing with it for a bit. So it's pretty cool though. Just having that modulation point for both resonance and cutoff is super cool. It's very unique. Yeah, you don't get to see it happen in real time. Same thing with Volcano, but similar effects for both. One thing you do not have is MIDI triggering. So if you want it to be sunk into actual synthesizer, you're a little bit limited for trash. So with filter modulation coming from an envelope, because in here all we have is an incoming signal threshold. You can also sidechain something to it. Like we'll get a drum loop. The Bapperoni. Bapperoni, bro. Now we have a sidechain input. Let's go to Bapperoni. This is how they work on Ableton. Peace, Johnny. Have fun doing whatever you're doing. Don't get hurt. So I'm over-resing the lows, and then I'm having the transients modulate the cutoff open. Yeah, I just need some like really squiggly sawtooth zippies in there. That's a lot of tipper sounds. Also Opio. But yeah, so a lot of neurofunk shit. narrow hop stuff made this way. Yeah, so the filters are pretty cool. Definitely underused, even by me. I use them for some stuff, but I definitely will kind of like reserve that for the sound I'm choosing and a lot of other things. But this is a really cool thing about trash. Actually, super unique. So with specifically what I just did here is something I do with it pretty often. All right, so you can do stuff like that with the auto filter as well. You just have it inside of trash's, whole GUI to go and do that shit with. All right, so now let's talk about trash, the actual trash, because we covered one big part of this. All right, so just checking how we're doing on time. How's everybody feeling? Feel a little bit more familiar with trash now that you've seen under the hood how everything works. Now it's time to think about trash and how this shit works. All right, so you can load in a bunch of preset curves. And these preset curves will be saved into the library, and you have a ton of different choices to mess with. They're all going to be kind of like geared for certain things. They will give you this blue line that pops up whenever you load one in. And that blue line is going to be what it is shaping it into. So what happens is now this linear curve is not your only saturation curve. So we have this, set, indicators right here. You can turn it on or off. Result is going to be the drive circuit. So this is actually what the waveform, wave shape looks like when set to this saturate curve. So we can change that. We can pull back input gain so we get less distortion, or we can change the drive, and that will change our curve. So the blue line is always the result, so it's what it's turning it into. So on some of these more heavy saturators, like Sine Shaper, drive is not changing amplitude, but it's changing the frequency of the sine wave being injected into the signal. So what's cool is we can go and add another shape into that. So now we're combining two shapes. So I'm using a Sine Shaper. Oops, I clipped it so hard that it just clipped its own output without even having signal. You gotta be careful when nudging it all the way to 0. So you can see this just gets shaped. Now it's hard shaping the sine wave that's shaping. Yeah, very. Exactly like sine compression. So this Sine Shaper is a sine compressor. So we can reshape the sine shape with our wave shaper. So we can generate points, we can see our result curve, we can change our preset curves with these knobs over here. This is pre-gain, so pre-stage in here, so we can pull it back, get less distortion with less input drive. You can also do the same effect with modulating this guy. So don't, be afraid to like push this down so it's not clipping too hard and then push it all the way up to 0, in its output, because then you can get really the most out of the saturator from that. So each of them will kind of work a little bit differently. All of the ones that are like hardcore drive wave shapers will just have pretty much a drive version. But some of these other saturators will have like a style as well. Delicate Harmonics has a style. So what it's doing is it's kind of like analog wave shaping. So at the middle, it actually gently curves to a clip. So it gently gets to the top, but it is pushing the wave in general. But when you go and push the style, it changes how it clips into 0 to no clipping into 0. So the style will change up a part of the saturator. So a few of the ones that are a little bit more gentle will have the style version. All right, so clip control right here is a hard clipper. So when you're driven all the way up to 0, which is hard clip, you won't get really that much function from drive. This is literally now telling, 0.1 or 0. That's what that hard clipper is telling you now. So now you can change the drive and then change the style, so it's like more of an analog curve. So the clip control preset is actually really good for that. Then all these other ones get a little insane. Crunchy Taco. I actually use that one a lot. Electric Trash. This is another sine shaper. This has two different harmonics controlling this, two different controllers for it. So we have now a full-on shape for our sine and then a frequency. But it is two different wave shapes because it does speed it up when we have a large amount of drive. So this is also sine shaping, but this is a different type. It's using clip and sine. So this is something we're going to talk about. This is the correct way to use it. The Nasher. Soft Taco. It's a softer sine shaper. Notice it's not being clipped all the way to 0. It has a curve until you go and push that. All right, so all these will kind of be different. The harder ones, we have a multiband saturator now. So if you go and distort loud frequencies, the loudest frequency, which is usually the harmonic at the lowest, because that usually has the most energy, you can, try harder curves on just that lower frequency, generate a ton of overtones from that, add it into the rest of the spectrum. So let's take out a band here. So it's a right click, remove band. If I want to focus on the bands, click in here, or you can click in here as well. So I can solo my low frequencies. The S, the B means bypass. So now I can go and hard clip these lower harmonics and create overtones, which are kind of like odd harmonics. I can hard clip it and use its built-in filter in order to take out some of the harmonics. And then I can get a little bit more amplitude out of my highs by just pushing it gently. Or I can try some fuzz, mix it in, because if you don't mix it in when you go in hard shape to the highs, it's going to sound super harsh, especially if anything else comes into that range that wasn't there before you calibrate. So that's your first dose of wave shaping, pretty much. So what I did was I hard clipped this low end, brought it all the way to 0 here, and hard clipped it. You can go into your distortion curves, use one of the harder clipper versions, and mix that in, see how it sounds. Almost forgot to take that off. I'm actually going to use Nasher on this one. All right, so what am I trying to do from this? I'm trying to create overtones that make the low end have more sustain, bring out the low mid-range. I want to generate harmonics that are above this band and then meet my high band. If I go and saturate the mid-range, I'm going to lose a little bit of clarity because second order harmonics. So whenever you go and modulate a band of frequencies, it creates harmonics above and below the harmonic range or frequency range of that band. So if I go and saturate the mids, then I will create harmonics below this and kind of phase out my low end. Do you keep the sub-region clean almost all the time when using trash? So no, and hence why I'm using this sine shaper on the lows specifically, because remember when you're going modulating anything that's made from a sine, you want to go and find something that's mostly a sine. Yeah, so on an 808 this thing does smash Kai. And this was a super verbed out drone sample. Alright, so this is a low end without any saturation. So we want to create harmonics that are right above this cutoff point that lock in and sum with my low mid range. So we want more summing in that range. We want our high band and our low band to sum. So what's cool is we can add another band in between these. Say if we want a little bit more clarity, insert band, a little bit more clarity to the mid range. I'll pretty much leave my low mid section untouched more than half the time. If I want more control of the low mids, I'll push the curve and naturally compress it with like this analog curve. Just gently curve. So I don't want too much mud because that's the section that's going to be mud. So I want natural mud to form because of the summing of frequencies. So if I'm going to go and saturate these higher mids, because these are the highs, these are high mids, these are low mids, and these are the lows. So low mids, we usually want to keep, again, untouched. Unless you're going for a specific sound. You know, I'm working on a bass line that's a bass line drone. So the, I guess, theory behind this is applicable to 808s as well. We can go and even drop an 808 in here, because this is mainly what I use on like big Dirty South style stuff. These are cheating as well. Oh, that one. I love that one. I just love that dunk. It's like when it dunks at the end of the 808, which is like, it's just that trunka shit, bro. Alright, so when you're doing with the 808, you want to keep your lower harmonics kind of intact. So you want to just do a very basic curve. So I do a clip control on this one. Go back to the original curve, clear all. See how it responds to the higher frequency? Hey, what's good, Wogue? Thank you. Appreciate you. Yeah, we're always here on a Saturday just dropping some saturated subs. All right, so again, you want to keep your lower harmonic, meaning your sine wave, in your harmonic series. Fundamental, the basic sine wave. You want to keep that one under control when processing low end stuff, because you want to just generate some upper order harmonics or second order harmonics, things that are generated, from nothing, from the saturation into lower mids. So with a 808, I might add in some erosion or something else to texturize the high end, or an extra harmonic up in, a couple octaves above the fundamental. And then I can saturate it up, so it's not too loud when I'm making the 808, but then once I go and get it to that point, then I can go and hit it a little bit harder. So with 808 specifically, if you really want to get a lot of like texture out of it, you're gonna have to hard clip it up in the higher register. Oof, that's a little too much. The impaler actually phases out as well. And I don't want to go too deep into the phase relationship yet, because we're going to talk pretty deep about wave folding next week. All right, so that gives it a ton of like sizzle to it. What I want though is this. I want a square wave. So the lower band will be affected by this just because we are creating harmonics below this band. So remember, back to the, second order harmonics rule, or sidebands. Sidebands, when you add more modulation into them, it will happen below and above your injection point. So if the injection point is a band, a frequency on a multi-band saturator, it will generate it above and below. Personally, I like Saturn for a lot of this kind of stuff. But in order to get some of the texture that I really want from this, I'm going to actually go and just add a little erosion, because that's just my shit. And then we're going to go for something a little bit more driven. All right, so my higher frequencies have that. We have clip control on the high mids. I'm going to add some noise. This beat needs some big L. Come on, big L. Put it on, man. Where you at, man? There we are.
Hey, yo, I heard. Hey, yo.
All right. So we got a big old saturated sub now. I'm actually going to keep that. I'm going to duplicate and just put this drum back down. I've also completely saturated this differently now. I'm going to go back to default on the second one. Okay, so we checked out how this curve works, what we're doing with it. But let's talk about a couple more of the functions here. So we have, again, the curves right here, our curve, which we're looking at. If you don't even want to have the ability to touch it, you can just add in the result curve, which again is controlled right here. So we have full control if we turn on our curve, base curve as well. So we can see what we shape it into. Sick. So that's something literally that is not on by default. So you actually have to turn this base calculation combination thing on. And add more wave shaping into it. What's also cool about this is you can go, let's go and clear all these points. Each point can be turned into a different type of curve. So tension is the ability to bend the line. Linear has the ability to create more points, but these bended points have a linear curve to it. So it makes it a little bit harder. Yeah. So then we have square, triangle, sine, and stairs. Square through sine are going to be different types of sinoid folding or fold back. So now this Q shape or curve is now going to control the speed of that harmonic. And every time we create a point, we will generate another point where we relay a different modulator at a different frequency. So we can go and right click on this guy and change it into a triangle, right click on that guy, change it into stairs. So stairs is going to be bit reduction. So it's like curving, but now it's making the curve more or less resolute. So positive phase, bit reduction, negative phase, bit reduction. Why is that different? Because this value, see that line, will now go down to 0, whereas that value does not. Now you do, Josh, now you do. Okay, so that's how all these lines work. We're going to talk more about specific wave shaping and how to control your noise floor and all that shit next week. Because if I go into that now, it's going to be another hour that I sit here before I finish trash. But this is the most important part of trash, right here. You can bypass the dynamics. You don't even need this shit. You can use a different processor. This is so you can control dynamics within trash and affect your saturation differently. Because, again, pre-gain, pre or post-gain affects the way saturators work. Less gain into a saturator, less saturation. Because if this is where our peak is, and then we're pushing it all the way up to 0, if I pull my peak down by pulling down my input gain, it actually puts my peak right about here. So changes the curve on the saturation. Okay, so that's how that works. So now we can change our different map for our plotting of points. So we can change it to logarithmic mode or linear mode. Linear is going to look nice and pretty. Logarithmic is nice because now it's telling you where your most audible range is. So this right here is going to be pretty much about 40-50 dB. And then all the way up into 0. So that means that this means 50, 40 below. Down to 24-bit range, that would be neg 144 below 50. So that means anything that's below neg 144, get out of here, point. He didn't invite you. So anything below this point, so if you just had some low-level noise just chilling around neg 96, which would be 16-bit noise floor range, you can push that chilling waveform all the way up to 0. You can even make a noise floor not exist both ways. So I can make anything below this curve now, below 50 dB, be nullified down to neg infinity, phase it out completely. Now, when a wave shaper is shaped like this, it becomes a noise gate. So, a bunch of different ways to go and apply this shit. Really cool for noise gates on that, especially if you have reverb going through a sound. just distorts it down to 0. Until you phase cancel it completely. So a wave folder would be a combination of both of these techniques. All right, bro, I'm gonna need you to stop. Okay. So we're gonna clear this, logarithmic mode, linear mode. Thank you for the follows, y'all. Appreciate you. All right, so that's kind of how that works. I didn't tell you pretty much everything, but I did actually introduce a noise floor theory because that's a whole different way of thinking about wave shaping. Now you can use wave shaping as saying bit depth look like this, because that's what wave shaping is. Wave shaping is allowing your waves to look like this. 24-bit waveforms are an ability to shape a waveform at a high resolution and have a noise floor at neg 144. 32-bit goes way above that and below that. So around 200 something for negative volume, which is, it's exponential. It's kind of like 96, a neg 96. You know, it goes up another about 80 or 90 dB or down, I guess, in negative values. But then 32-bit allows you to go above 0. So you can go and record on the way in 32-bit mode and then clip above 0 plus about 6 or 7. You know, not too much. You can't like clip all the way and just do as loud as you want, but pretty much you'll be able to save that harmonic until you go and downsample. If you downsample from 32-bit to 24-bit and don't save your clips 0 crossing peaks, then you will lose them. They will be chopped off. Okay, so that's another, I guess, big point about that, because that also affects how things are shaped. So whenever I do like big recording sessions, I try to record them at like 96 or whatever. And you can just set that right in your preferences. You just go right here, depending on your limitations of your interface. So I have a Motu Ultralight MK3 because it has 8 inputs and outs, and I'm using this multi-output aggregate that I made from Mac just so I can have everything kind of synced up here. But I can change my interface to go and record on the way in at 192, and that'll give you more harmonics to work with because you have more samples. It's just the way it works. So whenever you downsample or stretch out, you have more samples in between. So that gives you more material to go and reshape and bring back up to 0. That's cool. All right, so that's going to be kind of it about the saturator here. You know, you have 2 stages of it per band on the multiband. And then this final section over here is just an envelope. So you can see your output of your envelope. So that's what that does. All right, so now in convolution, this is another really huge one. So we talked about where convolution lives, how it works, options here, convolve tab, maximum impulse length in samples. So it's not saying sample rate, it's saying maximum sample length. So we checked that out in sampler, and we calculated that 288,000 samples, which is the max, is around 5 to 6 seconds. So we can go and import an impulse into this about 5 to 6 seconds long. But yeah, what's this cool for? You can run incoming signal through a cabinet and then into an amp, and that's pretty much what they want you to do, or vice versa, you know, which is, you know, trash the signal up, you know, get it super distorted, and then filter it down into a cabinet. You can even use another EQ in between that stage in order to get the cabinet to not resonate in harsh ways. so these are all different cabinet emulations. They're all pretty interesting. 410s are going to be more for basses. 210s, 212s are going to be more for guitars or higher sounds. And then you have 3 different mic types. Ribbon's going to be dark, condenser's going to be bright, and dynamic's going to be in between both. So how it works in the real world. But yeah, so a convolution is a spectral resynthesizer pretty much, and it resynthesizes 2 things, time and space. So it's a universe. That's all it is. That's all it is, man. So it's going to take the sample as an impulse response, convolve it, meaning filter it spectrally, and then it's going to create a string of delays that mimic its 6-second, buffer for the actual, tail of the sound. So you can make it kind of long, which is pretty long for that, but you can also modulate that sample. So you can offset the sample by its phase, making it wider, or you can separate it in pitch. Personally, I like to, on my respaces specifically, I like to switch around this ordering because it is super phasey. So I'll put the convolver before the trash so it can saturate everything back together pretty much. And pretty much make it wider from the beginning of the chain. Does that apply to resampling too? Yes. So that's specifically what I'm talking about with recording at a high sample rate, is when you go and resample, kind of want to do it at a high sample rate. So whenever I go and print in like VCV rack shit, I'll print it in at like 88.2 or 96 and then downsample it. I want more than less, because if you're stuck with less, it's going to be really hard to get more. You're going to have to go and re-record in a different environment, or have SoundBlade, which is a mastering DAW that allows you to pretty much internal lay back different sample rates per track, which is pretty cool. Yeah, of course. Any other questions, please hit the chat. But yeah, so I really like the body ones for like really basic stuff. Amp are going to be obviously for like big bass amps and stuff like that. If you're running something that's a little bit more gentle through it. And then everything else is going to be a little bit more effects based, so you can actually give it different textures from these different impulse responses. So this is really cool if you're like actually trying to make some type of like drone sound, because you can put it and convolve it in a space, and then you can send that into a bigger space. When making monster sounds, this is super, super good, especially if you're running something that's super low frequency like this. So the mech animal will sound extremely resonant on high frequency sounds. To be honest, Tortoise is a chiller. This one's probably the most usable one for like other sounds. But if we're gonna go and get like a, let's get a lion. Like say if you're sampling Snoop Lion. Just kidding. Why would you sample Snoop Lion? So vocode before. All right, so then we're going to pitch this down, get it a little bit more gritty. We're going to use texture. It's more granular. Let's stretch it out as well. All right, we'll get this effect in a second here after I actually just use repitch for now. Sick. It's a little bit closer. Pull this back a little bit more, less release. All right, so using this cat to modulate the line. So this gives you just really honky kind of versions of these. So now I'm going to warp this after I change the time with repitch. And that's a big thing that you want from it. And then this is specifically for monster sound design right now, because this is something I use a lot for that. Also applicable to respace sound design. So right now I'm trashing it a little bit. I'm just kind of distorting it up and then adding a convolution to it. So yeah, all of them give you a kind of different texture on top of that. Put this monster in a different space. Okay, so that's a good portion of that convolution section. So I really like this sound on top of, like, you know, free spaces and other things. But again, I put the convolution before in the graph. So before the trash. So for other things like this that need to be really up close, I use body. I like any of these. Fishbowl is pretty good. I like intimate as well. Hey, yo. And for darker things, you want a darker mic. And then things that need to be mono, pull down the separate, pull down the width. All right, another thing I do with this is I'll run convolution in a separate trash and then process them together. You can also use the dynamics section here to go and process it and then bring it back up. So convolution's pretty cool. Definitely something to check out. Now finally for the dynamics and delay section. We talked a lot about compression already, so we're going to talk more about it still. Here's another version of it. So I have my threshold meter set to histogram. So remember, that's in modules, threshold meter. Default is gain reduction. You can set it to histogram if you want. And then check out your multiband here. We have envelope, then we have side chain detection filter. So if I want to get my low end kind of under control when I'm using my convolver, pretty much what I want to do is I want to compress it, find the point where it's at, control it, meaning bring down the peak. That needs to happen quickly and for a minute, for a long time. Not literally a minute. So I want to get it down about here. So right now I'm subtracting about 5 dB of gain. So I can add back 5 dB around there. Hey, yo. All right. I'm also going to change my limiter to loud, not clipped. All right, so this is like hard compressing and smashing this low end. So I'm going to mix this back in. The original, just like halfway, parallel compress the lows. There's a ton of higher frequency stuff going on as well. Again, the histogram is going to show you RMS signal. Hey, yo. So a pretty soft curve on this one. I'm going to have it actually be a little bit slower on the attack just so I can let the transient through a little bit more and have it be a little bit quicker. Then I'm just going to turn down this individual gain, or individual band right here. Actually had it on global for when I push the low end, so let's actually go back to band. Push this up a few dB here, and then we'll go down here, pull this down a few dB. Hey, yo. All right, let's chill. Because now it's a little bit more in control, but I have texture on it, and I actually wanted to sit with the original sub. All right, so I'm using this to control the dynamics, again, after saturation too. And I haven't like changed the curves at all, so. But we also using convolution before all this stuff. So if I wanted to go and like darken a little bit more because it's clashing with some other of the synths, I can add a low pass filter right here, and we'll go and change band 6, which I'm using, into a low pass. Dang, I think it just broke. Oh wait, no, I just hit the bypass. No, did it break? Pretty sure it broke. All right. Oh, what a bummer, man. I've had plugins break on me so often that I know exactly what it sounds like when it happens. Okay. What are we sold on here? Huh. This preset might be completely correct. That's not chill. Definitely can happen though.
Hey yo.
Yikes. Might have to restart. I think my track is just corrupt now. I don't even know. I'm gonna have to go look into that later. Yeah, this shit happens, you know. We're live. Today I had a ton of Streamlabs problems, so, you know, shit happens. Alright, so we'll go back to the monster sound here. Alright, so we talked about dynamics. Now let's talk about the delay. So, a few modes here. We have tape, tube, analog, lo-fi, broken bit, and digital. So digital is going to be like clean version. So it's just like not too aliased. Lo-fi digital will be super aliased. And then we have analog, which is darker, and tape, which is darker. And then tape tube, which is more distorted. And then broken bit, which is completely bit reduced. So we have a dry wet fader instead of a knob, so we can mix the two signals together so they can get super loud, so beware of that. Then the feedback also goes up to 200%, so with it off, if you have any latent noise running through it, it will just self-resonate, so careful with that as well. Then trash is going to be another level of saturation slash compression, and you can kind of hear it a little bit when you push it up. So again, digital, bright, broken, lo-fi, analog, a little bit darker. All these other tape and tube modes, though, in the analog will respond a little bit harder to trash, though, because that's like the built-in wave shaper now in this circuit here. Then we have this little tape readout or tap readout. So when we go and change this, we'll see this change as well. Fortunately, we do not have that much control for this. So if you're trying to get this to move around in kind of a weird way, I recommend just doing it manually or going and automating or using Max for Live, something I can hook into it. So if I was making like a Transformers kind of monster-y sound, probably goes something like this, or Ubermod, and then micro modulate. So micro delays, all the pitch is going to be around 50 to 0 milliseconds. All right, so that's good right there. What I would do to add to this would be a couple things. We'll do Doppler, and this is stereo, so we'll just put in stereo. Sorry, stereo. And then some type of compression, saturation. Let's put a glue compressor, soft clip. Alright, so a ton of crazy shit we can do with that. So modulating delay time in here to make it a little bit metallic. And I'm using Doppler to create pitch modulation, early reflection modulation, and get a little bit more reverb time. And then use this little readout to modulate it. There's also Brower motion, which we'll talk about some of the more advanced sound design shit. I'm also texturizing this.